You have sought to fight limitations. In the space community, you are allied in this battle against limitations with proponents of the human potential movement. But unlike these utopians and believers in moral perfection, you acknowledge some limits.
The limits I acknowledge are the limits of the human psyche and the limits of the human capabilities. There are some things which limit us, obviously, going out into space, the laws of physics. What we see today in particular is not limits for money or capability or even knowledge. We have all of those things. It is our failure internally to believe that this is an essential part of the human experience that we must follow on. It is just as if we were in the middle of building a cathedral in the Middle Ages, and we decided, it's not worth putting the spars on, it's going to cost too much money. So we just left it and walked away. That's what we're doing now, only we haven't even got anywhere near the spars. We've got a foundation half covered in dirt already.
Can we exceed our current limits of knowledge without acknowledging our personal moral limits?
Oh, I think probably not. I think that the two are inextricably intertwined, and we have got to come to grips with the fact that what we're talking about is as much a spiritual, philosophical experience as it is a scientific, technical experience, and we simply haven't admitted that. It's very hard, particularly in the United States, to ever even discuss the philosophical, spiritual part of why we do things. We just want to do them.
Was this why you wanted to be involved in the drafting of the Space Constitution?
Well, yes, it was a part of why I wanted to be drafted in the Space Constitution, obviously, and I think that a lot of people don't know what the Space Constitution is, and basically it was, how do we devise a constitution which will be good for the very first settlements that will live in space? I mean, how are we going to live in space? And it's a very interesting subject, because it's going to be slightly different than living on Earth. None of us have got all the answers when we don't even we're not even able to ask all the questions. We don't know what it's going to be like to go and live 100% of your time totally dependent upon mechanical means just to breathe, when you're not even able to walk out the door to get away from people that you can't stand, that you're living in this tin can with, and you're about to throttle any minute. I think we're going to need some different rules. And I sense that maybe the drawers of this Constitution, the writers of this Constitution, needed an Irishman in there just to remind them that imperialism always lies deep in the American psyche and in the Western psyche, and that we needed to be very careful about what we laid upon the future dwellers in a space society when we hadn't a clue the kind of problems they were going to face, any more than the Brits knew the kind of problems that the colonists were going to face when they came out here. And I have a feeling that whether we like it or not, and regardless of what we say today or not, or what rules we make, they're not going to be followed there anyway. So I'm not sure it is a terribly useful exercise from the point of view of the future, but it is a very useful exercise now because we're forced to ask the questions.
In your career, you were instrumental in the founding of the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space. You were the first to be awarded their highest honor. You were the founding chairman of the International Space University. You established the first multidisciplinary space studies program at any university. And you have traveled the country encouraging young people to make their future in space. How can you justify leading young people, students, to professional careers where America apparently chooses not to go?
Well, it's a good question, and I've often asked it of myself, as a matter of fact. The justification rests in this, Jody. You have to have a critical mass of people who understand, who really do understand and have examined the problems and the issues and the values and the needs, and who have made up their mind that this is the thing that they want to do. These are the people who are going to be the vanguard of American society, leading us into space. They are the ones who are going to change the situation. Your generation are the ones that are going to have to do it, and that is why I spend the time. It is the responsibility of people in my generation, and particularly people like myself who've had the good fortune to be able to get involved like this and hopefully understand the situation at least somewhat, to go and do this. This is our responsibility. We must create the knowledge base in the next generation, and if we don't do it, there will be no hope at all.
When you were a young man choosing a career, you, at the age of 22, found yourself on a beach on an obscure island, penniless, with a pair of shorts, an illegal alien in a foreign land without papers. The local mafia was out to kill you. The natives were hostile. You had nearly no friends. Is that your idea how to start an explorer's career?
Oh, well, no, I wouldn't advise it for everybody. I had no friends amongst the establishment. I think I had a lot of friends amongst the citizens, however. And it is an experience that we should all perhaps have to go through, is learning to adjust to a totally new series of living conditions, a totally new environment, a totally new society. And I was living with natives in the West Indies then, and I learned a tremendous amount in doing that. I learned a certain degree of humility, though some of my friends perhaps wouldn't have agreed with that, but I really did. And I learned how you have to adjust yourself to other people's needs and other people's requirements of you, and that if you don't do this, you fail as a human being. And so in many ways it was a tremendously valuable experience. It was a tremendously valuable experience being penniless, because I have been ever since. So it was there was very little limited difference between that and my future life. So it also enabled me to do things as a result of that I could not have done otherwise. For example, people suggested that it was very silly of me to go to university and spend all that money and then to come down here where I started again at an advanced age into a totally new country, into knowing nobody and starting right from scratch. I may not have done it if I hadn't had that experience when I was young, and I think it was very valuable. Whether everybody else should do it, that would be a little different. You need a certain degree of standing out on the edge and living with on the ragged edge, if you will, which was why I got there, and not by design, but by default, perhaps.